Lalo, man, I'll tell you what, I am really excited about today because this is going to be more than just, well, here's an issue and here's X, Y, and Z or steps that you have to do. Well, and here's the thing, folks. We are talking about the USMCA. And one of the things that came up is that, in a sense, no shocker, but the U.S., the party involved, and basically the Trump administration is saying they do not want to renew the current USMCA agreement as it is. So, in looking at that, we basically are like, well, now what? So, a couple of things, and Fausto, I'm going to say my ignorance here is going to show here pretty quick because I'm like, okay, does that mean that USMCA is now stopped or does it keep going? It's my understanding it stays in place. And if nothing is ever renegotiated out of this in 10 years, in 2036, it will actually end. So that's kind of where we're at. This is be some current issues, and you have done a great job in lining up our next guest here for today's show.
Thanks, Andy. I had met Mr. Fausto Lopez many years ago, and I connected on LinkedIn back then. And I guess that just goes to prove you gotta make sure that you follow up and nurture your LinkedIn connections, because you never know, it might end up like this. So our guest, as I mentioned, is Mr. Fausto Lopez Aguilar, and he is Vice President of COMCE Sur, basically the Mexican Foreign Trade Council of the South region. He's Vice President of that organization. He is part of the delegation who goes up and down through all these meetings that negotiate the USMCA, or as they call it in Mexico, TMEC, Tratado de México, Estados Unidos y Canadá. So he's part of that delegation. He's got extensive knowledge in the automotive industry, which is what is helping his side, kind of negotiate that part.
It's like, well, okay, so it means we're not renewing. So what does that mean to us and all of that? And welcome to the show, by the way.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me. In order to make it more clear, let me go back to 2017 when we were negotiating the USMCA. I remember in that time, the US team came with a proposal on the table, and they said that they wanted to kill the agreement every 5 years. Being good or being bad, they wanted to kill it and then to renegotiate it. And in that moment, Canada and Mexico said no. I think that's not a good idea because there will not be certainty for the investment if you kill an agreement every 5 years. However, there was the U.S. team was insistent to have these cuts in the USMCA on the time. The final agreement we had is let's not kill it, let's review it, and not every 5 years but 6 years. So we create a clause. It was named the sunset clause. And it's in Chapter 34 of the USMCA. It basically says that we had two choices. Every 6 years, there will be a revision. If in that revision, the three governments check and review that everything is going well and there's nothing to be improved and the agreement is in a good way, then the decision will be to extend it for another 16 years. That was the first choice. And there was another alternative. If one of the countries will not be happy with the development of the agreement or would like to have changes or something that would not be happy with, then there is an alternative to renew the agreement every year during 10 years. So in that what is the purpose of that? Is, okay, let's check it in a yearly basis, and then in year 10, if nothing has been negotiated or the countries are still in disagreement, there is a choice to leave it, to stop, to get rid of the agreement. So this is what happened today. The U.S. decision is, I don't want to extend the agreement for 16 years. I want to go for choice B, which is let's renew the agreement. Let's have yearly revisions, and let's see if within these 10 years of revisions, we can make improvements, change, and we can leave. But that doesn't mean the agreement was killed. The agreement is still live, and we still are having the same rules, the same negotiations, I would say principles. Everything is as it is, unless there is a change that will have to be negotiated between the three parties. And this is how the revision works. Because as you know, we have two rounds. One round was in May in Mexico City. The second was on June in Washington. And the next one will be on July 20 in Mexico City. So this will be the third round. And the purpose of this third round is to put on the table and just to make analysis of the possible or potential change that this USMCA will bring into the new scenario. What I can say at this moment is that being part of these rounds, in the past, when we used to negotiate agreements, we used to go by chapters. But this time in the revision, we'll go by subjects, by topics. And the main topics that are being discussed in principle is agriculture, automotive, and steel. These are the three the main topics that are now on the table and we are discussing.
Fausto, before can I clarify something real quick before we go any further? So, as of today, we are status quo, as if we were the last 6 years. Nothing has changed, right? But that
Right.
means that you're negotiating again to see if you come into an agreement. If you do, let's say in July 17th, when you meet again, you come up with an agreement and everybody agrees. They're like, okay, we're all good. When does that take effect? July 1st, 2027?
No, and this is a good question. Depending on the changes that we would like to agree, and depending on the requests and how we will need to analyze every single request for changes. For example, if there is a proposal for changing the RBC for cars, or changing the LBC, or changing the steel requirement, after we get to an agreement, we need to review when this will be implemented. So we have to negotiate the implementation date as well. Okay.
But it's
let me
not
tell you,
overnight.
no, that's not overnight. And one important thing that I'd like to mention, uh, before going further with rules of origin or any other topics inside the agreement, the main goal in this revision is to review the tariff situation in North America. Because as you know, we are a region. We developed a region in NAFTA, and the NAFTA was a really great agreement that helped to create a huge region in North America with the three countries in order to improve exports, in order to improve localizations inside the region, to create more supply chains and engage the sectors like automotive, parts, agricultural. And now this situation has been disrupted with these new tariffs imposed since last year, especially to Mexico, you know?
Well, and there's also the issue of China. I think China is probably the biggest competitor to Mexico's manufacturing as a country, but that also is the Chinese transshipments through Mexico has been an issue, and I know that China has been investing heavily in Mexico. Is that becoming a key, I guess, point of negotiating point in this series of USMCA?
Not at this moment. However, we know and we've heard that there is a concern, the potential concern that how much disruption is China causing in Mexico. But let me tell you this one. Since last year, we have been analyzing the effect of the imports of vehicles from China to Mexico for the local market, because we don't re-export cars to other markets. It's just for local markets. So Mexican government imposed tariffs for goods coming from third countries, including China, and the tariffs have been increased to 50%. So today, if you want to import a car to Mexico from China, it's 50% the duty. Okay, and second, if we talk about the raw material or parts coming into the cars built in Mexico and going to China, we don't have a really huge amount of Chinese content. However, if the U.S. government would like to discuss, let's say, the minimis requirement for including Chinese content, we are open to negotiate and to see what would be the requirement. But I can tell you that it's important to remember that we have rules of origin, and the current rule of origin for the vehicles is 75%. So there's not too much room for Chinese content in this rule, you know?
Right. Yeah, well, that's the thing. The North American content was upped in the last go round with the USMCA, and it seems like the U.S. is moving more towards verification of country of origin of
Correct.
goods, of components, and different things. So all that. Lalo, looked like you had a question.
No, well, my thought here is also with regards to the idea of USMCA, and as was NAFTA, was like you said, Fausto, it's considered a what is considered a region, US, Mexico, and Canada, correct?
Right.
And
Correct.
so lately the idea has been that President Trump wanted to create more of that content going into automobiles to be not USMCA, not the three countries, not North American, but mostly American. I mean, is that what is also you feel like contradictory to what the agreement is and what you all may be? Again, if it's something that you are not able to talk about because it's part of the negotiation, feel free to tell me. It's fine with
No,
me.
no,
But I'm
it
just
is an
wondering how
open.
that works. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, and this is something that is public because we have read in the media this requirement of the potential requirement to have a U.S. content in the goods, especially in cars. And I can tell you this: in 2017, when we negotiated the USMCA, this idea came into the table. However, in that moment, we said that in a free trade agreement based on the rules, you cannot request a specific content for a specific country because it will not be regional. It will be national, local content. And
Right.
it is called, in international trade terms, is called performance requirement, which is not allowed under the WTO rules. In that moment, we said that, and there was another invention called labor value content. And
Yes.
the labor value content is another calculation based on that requirement of increasing the U.S. content in the car, and not only U.S. but Canadian content. Why?
Mhm.
Because in that calculation, it has never been mentioned U.S. content or Canadian. It's mentioned um, increasing the materials both in high salary zones, where high salary zone is a zone paying $16 per hour to a worker in
Mhm.
production line. So that was directly it went directly to U.S. and Canada materials, because
Hmm.
in Mexico we don't pay $16 an hour, obviously. So that was the intention of the LBC. With that calculation, you cannot you don't talk of a U.S. content. You talk about high salary zone. And there are also credits, and the credits, if you invest in a company for engines or transmissions or batteries in the US or Canada, you have credits. If you bring all the R&D and IT investments and research in the region, you have credits. So in my personal point of view, LBC has been a good special requirement for increasing the content in the region, especially from US. So I don't see a necessity to create another requirement which is called US content. I would say let's stick on the LBC and see how it works. But yeah, it's another request, and we need to first define what is US content, what will be the percentage, in how many years. I don't know. It's still subject to negotiation.
Right.
Nothing,
Okay.
nothing, nothing rigid at this moment. It's just a wish, a proposal.
I see.
Is there a opportunity for both Mexican and U.S. companies? Obviously, I'm focusing right now on U.S. Mexico because of your position. But is there and not trying to avoid Canada in this case, but is there an opportunity for U.S. Mexican companies to somehow help the negotiations come along, be active in some way jointly through any kind of particular associations, or do you have any suggestions for company owners to supply some information if needed?
Yeah, the way we have worked in the past and the way we work today is through associations. We have associations
Hmm.
in Mexico, US, and Canada working together, making synergies. I think it's a good development when we negotiate agreements that we get together. For example, an association in the US, an association in Mexico and Canada, we get together, as in the past we did for the USMCA negotiation. We get together, we present ideas, we create synergies, we see what will be the roof of certain amount of money or percentage that we can reach in the region for a certain requirement. And then
Hmm.
we create papers. These papers are presented to our governments, And then the government is easier because the government has the same paper in the 3 different countries and they can get together to a better solution. In this moment, we have also made the same procedure, getting together with the associations like INA, AMIA, and PACT. In the case of the US, is the Auto Drive America, the Big Three Association. We have had conversations, and then we have developed what will be the best way to create a possible zone of the 3 countries, especially for automotive goods. With that is good because in that moment we put our ideas, our needs, and we put what will be the potential requests, and they also put the potential requests and the ideas on the table, so we can work together and create synergies and get to this zone of possible agreement that could be presented to our governments in order to finally get to a great solution and a good negotiation.
And let me ask you another simple and naive question, but I've never heard in these last 2 rounds that Canada was involved. Is that, am I wrong or?
No, you're right. You're right. As a matter of fact, in 2017.
Yes, I remember that in 2017.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's true because there was the U.S. and Mexico, and then went ahead and came up with a deal.
Yeah,
and then all of a sudden Canada came along.
Yeah, and this is it's more a political situation. In 2017, there was something that happened between Canada and the U.S. And rapidly in one of the rounds, we didn't see Canadians there, and we asked what happened with them. They had no response, and Mexico and U.S. continued negotiating for the last rounds. And at the end, we came to a conclusion that was named Conclusion in Agreement in Principle. That was the name of the USMCA, Agreement in Principle. It was in September, and then in November, Canada joined the US and Mexican group, and after that, we have the USMCA. So I guess in this moment we are mirroring that. I guess the reason is because of the retaliation that Canada applied to the US in terms of duties. And maybe that's the reason why Canadians have not been called to the rounds. However, we expect that this July, today, July 1st, the announcement for the agreement was made by the three countries. So we expect that in July, it's potentially possible that the Canadians will be again with us, with Mexicans and the U.S. negotiating the final, or not the final, but maybe the most important topics.
Correct. Well, Canada is expected to attend the July 20th in Mexico City discussions, correct?
Correct. Yeah, correct.
Okay. Well, it's because I was going to ask this question. If there's still turmoil with this, because it's like, all right, if we're looking at not renewing it for 6 years, and it'll be every year, I guess, a review in this kind of context, could it be that the potential of just a bilateral rather than a trilateral agreement will be made? I mean, it seemed like the first go round, like you just said, it was an agreement in principle between U.S. and Mexico. I think Mexico, you're definitely much more active in the negotiations.
Yeah, I can tell you this: everything may happen since we will have this yearly revision. We will be subject to different, I would say, movements of the trade, the tariffs, requirements. So, in order to avoid uncertainty, and this uncertainty will create lower investments in the region because of what will happen, I think one recommendation will be that we have a great and a good revision this time. Why? Because if we develop good results, these results might be determined and implemented for 5 or 6 or 7 years. And with this, we will not have this problem of, what will happen? Maybe the next year there will be no revision, or maybe just a informal meeting and say, okay, everything is going well. Let's see you next year. Okay. So everything will depend on having a good development in this revision, because that will create certainty for the rest of the years. However, if we don't have a good development this year, then we need to wait for the next round in the next year, and not necessarily on July 2027. It could be any time during the next years. And then we will have to work really hard in order to avoid uncertainty that could hurt investments,
You have been a strong advocate for not only your government, but companies and other government, U.S. and Canada as well, to not wait until July to, engage in it's like be very proactive and start, the discussions and all of that. And I think it's showing it because, as Lalo, you were just saying, from our perspective in the news, we're hearing discussions with U.S. and Mexico, and I don't know if Canada's even at the table. But anyway, with that, is there anything at this point? There was discussion of an increase in more content, I guess more the U.S. content or for the auto industry or country of origin rules and all that. Since the U.S. is saying they don't want to renew this in the way it is, those new higher compliance rules for country of origin for auto will not go into effect at this point in time. Is that right?
Well, that depends on the revision this time. If the revision is requiring to increase the rules of origin, increase the RBC percentage, or increase the LBC or the aluminum or whatever, it has to be negotiated, and we need to get to an agreement. How much do you want to increase it? In how many points? In how many years? And after we came to this decision, next step will be to determine when these changes will be implemented, and then to go for it,
So it's status quo for now, but so the new discussions, that's what I'm getting at. It's like for U.S., Mexico, Canadian companies that are dealing with all of this at this point, status quo, keep doing what you're doing, and no new changes yet to be implemented because they haven't been signed or agreed to.
Yeah. Today everything
but that's
is
subject to change based on your discussions.
Yeah.
Okay.
Today everything is as it is. Now we are reviewing, and if changes are required, we need to negotiate and see in how many years or how many time that will take place. But at the moment, the USMCA remains as it is.
Fausto, when like when you get invited to a party, they sometimes ask you that you can have a +1, like you can bring someone with you. Do you think I can be your +1 for the next negotiations?
We need to talk about that. Let me ask permissions.
Not that I want to negotiate or anything, but I've got a vested interest because my USMCA training class needs to be updated. I'm sure I want to be the first one to do it. I'm being selfish and I'm being silly.
Well, first I would like to invite you to. First, I would like to invite you to my classes because I'm a professor as well on this topic.
Sir. Yes.
I love it. I love it. Seriously, this is one of those where, as we're looking at it, is there anything that you would like to see or you could advise, I guess, companies as far as investment, as far as the compliance on this, or the strategy, in other words, for I'm a small businessman, I'm looking to do business and looking at manufacturing. What should I do based on all of this? Most people hear this kind of news and they just stop and it's like, well, no, hold up. What do you recommend at this point, Fausto?
I will divide my recommendation in two ways. The first one is my recommendation directed to the companies that currently comply with the USMCA. Just be pending of the changes that are coming and try to localize more components within the region. Second, make sanity checks on your calculations, your tariff classifications, your rule of origin, your certificates of origin in order to avoid any surprise, because origin verifications are currently getting more and more every day. Right. And they are more drastic in their decisions and their verifications results. So be aware of that. Review again your tariff classifications, review your calculations, and make a double check on all your documents or your information that you use to calculate and to determine that the goods qualify as originating, in order to avoid surprises, and keep localizing components in terms of increase your level. because in the future, as today, besides the autos, if we go to the parts and rest of the industries, and if you comply with USMCA, you pay zero.
Right.
So continue doing that. And the second recommendation is for all companies that in the past they said, oh no, USMCA is so difficult, I don't want to go into this. It's better to pay 2.5% in the US. Now they're paying 27.5%. No? So they
Right.
are
And
really
so now the incentive is there. Yeah.
they are really repaying of what they did in the past, because they said no, it's really complicated to get into this new agreement with new requirements. I prefer pay 2.5% and just avoid any other I would say waste of time or spending more money. It's better for me to pay 2.5. Now they're paying 27.5%. You know. Many companies have approached to me and they said, "What do I need to do to comply? Why, or how did you do in the past when you decided to go into this agreement and comply with all these exigent and difficult requirements?" So my recommendation is now is time to have a reconsideration and check what will be the steps to comply in the USMCA. Because if they remain in the parts of non-compliance, everything will be worse for them, worse and worse every day with this tariff situation and this globalization and all these USMCA revisions. I'm pretty sure that the non-compliance company will have a really bad life in the future if they don't comply anymore.
Well, to your point, it's one of those where you would have to work with your engineers and your cost accounting
Oh
and
yeah,
all of that and the compliance teams, and it would have to be a teamwork effort. This is not like one area needs to say, well, what do I got to do to comply with the USMCA? And it's like, well, you need a team of people to work
yeah.
collaboratively to based on what you're saying. So when you advise your clients, I assume that's, hey, when we're talking about meeting and to discuss USMCA, transactions, I would think you're looking to say we need a representative from all these different departments so that we can talk collaboratively on the issue,
Yeah,
right?
and you said that is correct, what you have mentioned. You need to work internally with your production team, with the engineering, with your purchasing team, with development. But it's another important entity, which is your supply chain. It's very important to get
Yes.
closer with your supply chain, your vendors, in order to train them, to talk to them and help them to localize and be more in a regional concept, and not to have vendors importing raw material from China that could impact you.
Excellent. Excellent. I will say that this is one of those where, to our listeners, as you're looking at sourcing, again, sourcing locally is what Fausto is saying here. Locally meaning regionally. I mean, this regional content is very, very important as that gets defined and negotiated and whatnot. But also, pulling your teams together and adhering to the current rules, and as well as even expanding for the future, because I could see where not having this agreement just go forever. There's got to be some reviews, because let's just face it, things change in the world. Political saber rattling, if you will, goes on, and understand that. But things change, and at one point, all the manufacturing was booming in Mexico, and then it wound up going to China. And it looks like it's coming back strong and heavy in Mexico as well as in the U.S. and Canada. So hopefully this will be something that we can work collaboratively again to come up with a multi-win scenario here, right?
Right. Correct.
Yeah, I mean, in all seriousness, I mean, if anybody does want to learn or understand this, I mean, and I know it's a shameless plug. I am actually talking to Fausto and trying to get him on board also as an instructor. He teaches this at the university and college level in Mexico. We are gonna try and see if we can get him on board for like all the automotive and all the detail stuff. But there is availability of that training, as well as even software that we've developed. Again, apologies for the shameless plug, but that's that we do have resources. Reach out, let us know. The good news is that it is status quo, as Mr. Fausto has indicated, and so right now anything that you could be using is the same as it was last year or the year before, or even since 2020, and we can continue to help you through those resources. But Fausto, we really do appreciate you coming on the show and clearing all of this up, because there has been a lot of confusion, and we really do appreciate it. I was so excited to see your posts when you were in DC talking about how you were negotiating. I was like, oh my goodness, I know him, and I know we need to get him on the show. So, it was really good. Whenever you're done with the next round in Mexico City, maybe we can circle back and get another update and see how that goes, and hopefully maybe you might find a way to negotiate something for someone from the U.S. and someone from Mexico from Canada that are sitting there with you, and all three of you come on the show. I mean, that would be great to
Great.
just hear.
Sounds
A
good.
good panel.
Good
That
idea.
would be a good panel. Yeah, that would be a great panel
Yeah.
for the show. So, but we'll
Yeah.
talk about that. But thank you so much.
Sure, anytime, my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
All right. Folks, again, look at the Global Training Center. Lalo was talking about that. That is a great resource, and we'll have more on this. But USMCA, don't wait and think, well, I'll get to it at some point. Be prepared, because the compliance and scrutiny is going to go up, and you're going to have to prove your content, your country of origin, and all that. So get ready. With that, I guess we need to sign off. Everybody have a great day.